The scriptures encourage us to testify and rejoice for the things that God has done. We sing plenty of songs about such things in church and listen to others singing about it on radio and TV some of the time. But for many people, it doesn't really go any further beyond the weekly ritual of singing hymns or listening to Christian radio or television. Think about it. When is the last time you actually rejoiced? And if you recall, a few weeks ago, we studied on what rejoicing really means. To be glad and to thrive. When is the last time you personally rejoiced? When's the last time you sang to God, personally, for something that He has done specifically for you? Not in a corporate church setting, not with a group, just you and God. When? For most people, they can't even remember that far back. And the question is, why is it so rare? For something that the scriptures encourage us to do, why doesn't it occur more often? Why do Christians spend more time complaining and depressed instead of singing and rejoicing? Personally, I believe they aren't focused on the right thing. I believe that their vision is skewed, and they're looking at themselves and their current circumstances instead of looking at Jesus and seeing the victory that He has already won. I know that I've lived that way for quite a long time, and I recognize the signs and the symptoms of it very well. So today, I want to share with you an encouraging study on seeing the mercy of Jesus and how seeing His grace, His mercy, causes you to overflow with genuine, real rejoicing. Welcome to Thriving Branch. I'm Jim. Today we are studying about the mercy of God and how seeing His mercy, seeing His grace, causes you to overflow with gladness and rejoicing and thriving, because this is the foundation of how you thrive. This is the beginning. This is the thing that sparks everything else. Receiving the love, the mercy, the grace of God for you, and allowing that to let you overflow. At first, this study may seem trivial, silly. I mean, when's the last time you've actually heard someone do an entire study on rejoicing? I doubt many people would even think it to be necessary. But that very fact is precisely why I believe that it is necessary. Because for many of us, rejoicing at all is not really as common as it should be. And note that my use of should be doesn't mean that rejoicing should be legalistic. No, rather it should naturally be a regular occurrence for someone genuinely enjoying the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ every day. And that right there is the first key point of our study today. Because as I said in the opening, I believe that if someone isn't living a joyful and rejoicing life, if that attitude isn't common to them, it may be because they're focused on the wrong thing. You see, it is very natural for us to get swept up in day-to-day activities and occurrences, to live life on a kind of autopilot mode, where we instantly react to whatever happens, and the drama of the moment without ever thinking or considering how God and the truth of Christ factors into it all. And when we are in that autopilot mode, rejoicing is almost impossible. And so are many other factors related to Christ. Because we get so busy looking at the poisonous snakes that we don't see the bronze serpent on the pole. Many of you may or may not understand the reference I just made, but let's look at it further. In Numbers chapter 21, verses 5 through 9, because this is the first thing I want to share with you today. Numbers chapter 21, verses 5 through 9. Let's read it together. Ready? 1, 2, read. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loathes this light bread. And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said to Moses, Make you a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looks on it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it on a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. Now, this is very interesting. Notice first what is recorded in verse 5, that the people spoke against God. This is nothing new. They had been doing this throughout their journey up to this point as well. But there is particular interest in what precisely they say here. First they say, Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? Now, putting aside that this is a direct attack on the character and intent of God, this question, which is more of a statement, shows us what they were really focusing on here: the journey. If you go up one verse and look at verse 4, you will read that the soul of the people was discouraged because of the journey. The journey is what they were looking at, not the fact that God was with them the entire time, not of the great miracles he performed, or the fact that they were no longer slaves now, but they were looking at the journey. And looking at the journey caused them to become discouraged. Then they continue with more false statements based on their discouragement. They say, For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loathes this light or worthless bread. Now notice the very inaccurate statements that are being made here. First, if there was no bread, then there would be no bread for them to be hating and calling worthless. You see, their very statement doesn't make sense. You can't say there is no bread, and by the way, I hate this worthless bread. Second, we know that there was water. In fact, in the previous chapter, they just saw the second miracle of God giving them water from the rock that Moses improperly struck after being told to speak to it. So we know that there was water too. Now, why was their thinking so clouded to make these false statements? Again, it's because they weren't looking at God and His merciful provision. They were wrapped up too tightly in themselves and the journey and their own perception of their circumstances. In fact, their vision was so skewed that they make the amazingly terrible statement at the end of verse 5. Our soul loathes this worthless bread. This statement is so awful because the bread here that they hated so much and called worthless was actually the manna from heaven that God was miraculously supplying to them. They had totally lost sight of everything God had been providing for them. They were no longer focused on His love and His care, and had totally collapsed in on themselves spiritually. In Psalms chapter 78, verses 24 and 25, the manna from heaven is described as the food of angels, the champion's bread. Here they call it worthless. We see this happen a lot in our lives. When we become nearsighted, spiritually introverted, we often fail to see all the wonder that God has done and continues to do. Now in verse 6, we have a very unfortunate English translation saying that the Lord sent fiery serpents on the people. Hopefully we have a better understanding of God's nature and character than that. And we know that God did not send calamity on the children that He loves and cared for throughout the entire Exodus. It's not as if God's patience suddenly ran out after all of this. No, not at all. In fact, in Acts chapter 13, verse 18, it's testified that God did not lose His patience with the Israelites in the wilderness. So, the scriptures actually tell us that God did not lose His patience. God did not suddenly get angry and smack His children. No. So what did happen? Well, the key is actually understanding the Hebrew grammar here. The word sent in Hebrew is not the causative tense, but it is the permissive tense. God lifted His hand of protection because the people hated it. Not because God said, well, I'm going to teach you a lesson. No, the people said, we hate this. We don't want your provision. And that's the key to everything. Remember that Jesus testified about Himself in John chapter 6, verse 51, that He is the true living bread that came down from heaven. The manna that God rained down every single day for them was actually a type and a shadow of the provision of Jesus. And they said that they now loathed it and considered it as worthless. So since they were unwilling to receive the provision of God, the fiery serpents were able to come in and start biting. The word fiery in Hebrew is the word saraf, which means burning or burning ones, the fiery ones. When the fiery serpent bites, whether it shows itself as a physical symptom or in your emotions may become overwhelming. Your finances are a mess. Whatever it is, when the snake comes in, don't despair. There is an answer. And it may not be what you expect. It probably isn't. You see, religion will tell us that the appropriate response in such times as these is contrition, sorrow, regret, remorse, guilt. However, that is not the response that we see prescribed in these verses. We do see something very specific, though. First, in verse 7, we see that the people make the same mistake that we often make today. Their request, when it is analyzed, really makes no sense. They ask God to take away the serpents, and we usually do the exact same thing. We ask God to take away whatever problem currently has our attention. Because remember, we aren't really rejoicing in Christ at the time. We are focused on us and our problems instead. It makes no sense to ask God to take away the problem if the root cause has not been fixed and the effects are already manifesting. Think about it. Even if God took away the serpents right when they asked him to, the serpents had already sank their teeth in. The poison was already inside, was already coursing through their veins at that moment. The snakes were no longer the problem. The poison was the problem. What should we do then? Tear out our hair, rend our garments, fast for days, and pray until our knees are bloody? No, none of that. Look at verses 8 and 9. And the Lord said to Moses, Make you a fiery serpent, set it on a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looks on it, he'll live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, put it on a pole, and it came to pass, if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. God's solution was not sorrow, was not regret, was not contrition, not to even focus on the apparent problem at all, but instead focus on the solution, the provision of Jesus. Notice that the fiery serpent on the pole was made of brass or bronze, a symbol of judgment, showing that the thing which had bitten the people had been judged. Jesus said in John chapter 3, verse 14, that he must be lifted up the same way that Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness. When we are faced with situations which try to steal our focus and hinder us and even threaten us, our response should not be religious. Our response should not be religious groveling or riddled with guilt or regret, not pleas for God to remove things which we think are problems, but instead to rejoice as we look to the solution, knowing that the thing which troubles us is already defeated and has already been judged, and it has lost. Just as I did with my eye problem some time ago in one of our past videos here. In closing, I want you to see the words of David as he was moved by the Holy Spirit to write the following words in Psalm chapter 66, verses 16 to 20. I want you to turn there now. Read it with me. Psalms chapter 66, verses 16 to 20. Ready? 1, 2, read. Come and hear, all you that fear God, and I will declare what he has done for my soul. I cried to him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. But truly, God has heard me. He has attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which has not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from me. The irony here is that there are some who try to use verse 18 in isolation to prove that God will not hear the prayer of a sinner. If that were really the case, then no one could be saved, because God would never hear the prayers of sinners. In actuality, these verses highlight the amazing mercy of God. In verse 16, David says to all who would listen the declarations of what God has done for his soul, that is, his mind and his emotions. You see, there has been a change of mind, a change of emotions for David. David himself didn't do it. David didn't affect the change. David wasn't the active agent, but God did it for him. In verse 17, David says that he cried to God with his mouth, but they weren't cries of sadness or guilt or condemnation or anything like that. Instead, David cried with rejoicing. God was extolled with David's tongue. Extol means to praise and rejoice and exalt. David was exalting God with his cries. He wasn't crying like we would do to God today, saying, "Oh God, please help me. God, I'm so burdened. God, I'm being attacked left and right." No, David was exalting God. He was praising God. He was rejoicing. Now, I invite you to take a fresh look at verse 18. Not in isolation, but look at it in the context of the other verses. Look at what David says. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. What does that really mean? The word for regard in this verse is the Hebrew ra'ah, meaning to see. Notice the detail of what this verse is saying. If I see iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear. It doesn't say if the Lord sees iniquity in your heart, he won't hear. He says if you see iniquity in your heart, the Lord will not hear. The question here is, do you still see iniquity in your heart? Or do you see it as a judged and defeated thing on the pole, just as the bronze serpent? Are you recognizing that your sin, your iniquity, has been laid on Jesus? Or do you still see it as a part of you? If you still see yourself as a dirty sinner, if you still see yourself as someone who is riddled with iniquity, then you aren't recognizing that Jesus has made you a new creation. You're still seeing yourself as the old creation. You aren't acknowledging the finished work of Christ. If you still see iniquity on you, then you aren't acknowledging the work of Christ personally for you. If, however, you see your sin, your iniquity, as being laid on Jesus on the cross, then you absolutely have a real and genuine reason to rejoice every single day. And you can say, just as David does in verses 19 and 20, "But truly, God has heard me. He has attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which has not turned away from my prayer, nor his mercy from me. Be blessed.